Hi, I'm Catherine Fritz. We're the party of the cooperative movement, committed to sharing power and wealth. David Graeber, among others, argues that power inequality is the real challenge. Inequality in the power to make choices, the power to provide for self and family, the power to develop one's potential. These inequalities are devastating to individuals and the wider community. In modern society, wealth inequality is strongly related to power inequality, and it's easier to measure. So research tends to focus on incomes and wealth as a measure of inequality. Thus, inequality and poverty are addressed in terms of money. But it's worth remembering that the real underlying inequalities are those of power. Poverty and inequality have many aspects: food, housing, fuel, other necessities, transport, health, including mental health, education, and amenities such as holidays or pets. Over 3 million low-income households in England were fuel poor in 2020. That was when universal credit included a £20 weekly uplift, and fuel prices were at a 25-year low. Imagine how many low-income households are fuel poor today and will be fuel poor this autumn and winter, with the high cost of living, record-breaking fuel prices, and wages and benefits that fail to keep pace. Fuel includes all sorts of fuels for home heating, powering appliances, and transportation. The off-gem price cap applies only to natural gas and electricity. Electricity is affected by wholesale gas prices because over 1/3 of our electricity is generated using natural gas. People have limited control over household fuel costs. Energy price is something on which individuals have very little control. Type and efficiency of devices, including things like home insulation, those require investment that low-income households often can't manage. And you can control to some degree the amount of use and the selection of products, but some use is often necessary, as are some products. Now, fuel poverty results from 3 factors: available income, the amount of fuel needed, and the cost of fuel. The amount of fuel needed to heat a home is defined by the amount needed to meet World Health Organization guidelines. That is, to achieve a minimum indoor temperature of 21 degrees centigrade in living rooms and 18 degrees centigrade in other areas for 9 or 16 hours each day, longer hours if people are in the house all day long. Thus, the amount of fuel needed is a direct result of the energy efficiency of the dwelling. Fuel poverty is on the rise because people have less available income, because of the general cost of living rises, wage and benefits that fail to keep pace, and removal of the universal credit £20 uplift. The energy efficiency of homes can improve with investment, but declines in dwellings that lack maintenance, which applies to many households on low incomes. The cost of fuel has risen because of low demand during lockdowns, with increasing demand now without increasing supply. Cold winter in Europe last year, reducing storage supplies. Increasing demand in Asia, especially China, because of reduced coal production, although that may be reversing. And the UK is now far more dependent on imported natural gas. Also, profits and dividends for the companies occur at every stage, from exploration to delivery. And this time we know there's a reduction in the use of Russian fuel products related to their invasion of Ukraine. To be fuel poor in England at this time is to have a low income and live in a dwelling with a poor energy efficiency rating. Now, the vertical component of this graph depicts the energy efficiency ratings with the poorest, that is G, at the bottom, and the best, that is A, at the top. The threshold applied is between C and D. Anyone in a dwelling with a good energy rating, A through C, cannot be fuel poor by definition. Those in the poor energy ratings, if they have a low income, can be fuel poor. So this horizontal component is showing income with the lowest on the left and the highest as you move to the right. The threshold applied is the poverty level, so that's 60% of median income, after housing costs and energy costs are deducted. And naturally, energy costs will be lower for the higher energy efficiency homes, which is why there's an angle on that. So those in this lower quadrant here are fuel poor. This is the same sort of graph, but this is a scatter plot showing actual data for 2020. And you can see that each dot here is representing a household, and the proportion of dots falling into the fuel poor area, that describes the breadth of fuel poverty among the population. Zooming in to consider the fuel poor households, bottom left here, some have incomes that are farther from the threshold than others. For example, consider a household at this point. The additional amount of income needed to reach the income threshold is quite substantial. This gap describes the depth of fuel poverty for that household. Now, the second point here you can see is also fuel poor, but it's less deeply so than the first point. Now, in the 2020 data, the most recent data available to us at this time, we can see that 1/4 of the households in dwellings with an energy efficiency rating of D or E are fuel poor, whereas 30% of those in bands F and G are fuel poor. On the other hand, consider the differences in the depth of fuel poverty. Households in dwellings with the poorest energy ratings are on average about 6 times as deeply into fuel poverty as those here in the higher energy ratings. Now, another way to think about who's affected is by the type of household. Single parents are the most likely to be fuel poor, with 27% of those households in fuel poverty. But older couples who are fuel poor are more deeply poor than other groups, almost 100 pounds farther from the threshold than the single parents. Some interesting related data from 2019 shows the percentage of households with overspends, where expenses exceed income. Considered by region, we can see that fuel poverty occurs less in the Southwest. This is the graph on the left, the map on the left. It's less in the Southwest than in most other regions of England, but the depth of fuel poverty in the Southwest is the highest in the nation. Rising fuel costs impacts all households, but the impact can be deadly for low-income households. Living in the cold has negative consequences for health. Without heat, homes in England easily fall below 8 degrees in the winter, leading to negative health effects. The cold leads to increased heart attacks, strokes, respiratory illnesses, flu, and other illnesses. The effects are most marked among older people, very young children, people with serious medical conditions, and people with poor housing or economic circumstances. Some of those that we're more likely to see being fuel poor. Excess winter deaths are usually around 25,000 in England. The rate here, incidentally, is more than twice that for Finland, which is colder. Now, these are the data for last winter, which is very difficult to interpret because the exceptionally high number of excess winter deaths is attributable to COVID. Some of those deaths can be attributed to cold, some to COVID, and some to a combination of both, but there's no real way to separate those out. Now, there is help available to varying degrees on all fronts. There's help to increase income, such as the winter fuel payment, which applies to people of pension age. And this year, an extra 300 pounds per household has been added to that. Cold weather payments apply when we've had freezing weather for a continuous 7-day period, and for people on certain benefits or obtaining support for mortgage interest, they get 25 pounds for that 7-day period. This is a new one, £650 one-off cost of living payment. This is for people on means-tested benefits, and part of it will be paid in July and part will be paid in autumn. And incidentally, these are tax-free and the amounts won't be affecting their benefits. Similarly, there's a new £150 for people on disability benefits, recognizing that they may have additional expenses and or need more heat. And this will be paid in September. And again, it's tax-free and doesn't affect their benefits. The government's also added more funds to the Household Support Fund. These are funds made available to local authorities to help support struggling households. Now, help is also available to reduce fuel costs. The energy bills, the warm homes discount was $140. It's been increased to £150 this year, and that's for people on pension credit or with low incomes. And there's also a Park Homes version of this. It's paid to the energy supplier. The Energy Bill Support Scheme, that's new, £400 per household over 6 months from October, paid directly to the energy supplier, and that applies to all households. It will not be repaid, it's a grant. So it doesn't target low-income households. Similarly, the energy tariff cap doesn't benefit particularly low-income households. It applies to anyone and everyone. And it prevents the gas and electric rates from rising beyond a cap. And people are now more aware of it because that cap has been increasing rather dramatically and is predicted to increase even more substantially going into October. There are also schemes to help improve energy efficiency. And these include the energy company obligation. Energy companies are required to fund programs that provide energy efficiency improvements to low-income households. The Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme has similar aims. In this case, local authorities bid for these funds and typically contract with a company to provide energy efficiency improvements for low-income households. The Home Upgrade Grant, that's specifically for homes that are not on gas. Perhaps they're using oil or other fuels to heat the house. And this is to make the houses more energy efficient by putting in insulation and or changing to a lower carbon heating system. And there are social housing decarbonization funds, and those apply specifically to registered providers or councils that have social housing, and it's funds that they can use for low energy efficiency homes in order to make them more energy efficient. When we look at the impact of energy improvements, and these are data just for the 3 local authorities that are in effect my own branch of the Cooperative Party, you can see here the percentage of dwellings in each category. If we look at the ones in red, those are the poor energy efficient, and in all cases, that's well more than half of them. If you look at what is possible with reasonable improvements, you can see that that reduces it substantially to no more than about 20% in the worst cases. So there's a lot that can be done both to address climate change and to reduce energy bills with these improvements. However, the programs for doing them are very limited and affect only a small proportion of the housing that's out there at any given time. And so it's important to do this. Now, what kind of savings could you get? Well, by doing these improvements, going from the top bars to the second bars, particularly for the red ones, the average heating costs go from £793 to £524 for Torbay, saving £269. And to move on to South Hams at the bottom, that would result in a savings of £356. So it's rather substantial, and these energy improvements are important. Thank you.